The twin sons of Krill beat down on the rust-red sand, turning the arena into a shimmering furnace. Dane Rourke tasted the grit in his teeth, the salt of his own sweat, and the metallic tang of his opponent's blood. The creature, a four-armed Zytrek gladiator, lunged, its lower arms fainting while the upper two swung heavy. Vibromaces. Dane moved. He was human, which meant he was fast, fragile, and desperate. 6 years in the Kresh Syndicate circuits had taught him that survival was not about strength. It was about the economy of motion. He ducked under the whistling maces, the wind of their passing hot on his neck. He drove the chipped obsidian blade he'd earned in the last round straight into the Zytrek's armored torso. It was like stabbing solid rock. The creature bellowed, a sound like tearing metal, and swatted him away. Dane rolled, the impact rattling his bones. The crowd roared. They were a mix of species, a grotesque collage of galactic aristocracy and low-level scum, all united by their thirst for blood. They hated him. He was the human, the primitive, the anomaly who refused to die. The Zytrek charged again. Dane waited. He watched the eyes, all 4 of them glowing with engineered rage. The maces rose. At the last possible second, Dane dropped flat, sliding in the blood-slicked sand. He went under the charge, raking his knife upward into the soft, unprotected tissue where the creature's 4 arms met. The Zytrek stopped. It looked down in confusion, its maces wavering. It dropped to its knees, then fell forward, crashing onto the sand in a cloud of red dust. Silence. The crowd held its breath. Dane rose, his chest heaving. He was covered in filth, his muscles screaming. The High Proctor, a gelatinous being floating in a pressurized sphere, buzzed toward him. "Finish it, human. Grant the crowd its release." Dane looked at the fallen Zytrek. It was dying, but it was not yet dead. He was supposed to take the head. That was the show. That was the release. Dane spat a thick gob of bloody saliva onto the sand. He turned his back on the gladiator and stared up at the Proctor's box. He raised his knife, not in salute, but in defiance. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he hurled the blade. It sank, hilt deep, into the armored glass of the Proctor's sphere. The glass cracked. The Proctor recoiled. The crowd erupted, and it was not a cheer. It was a riot of outrage. Dane Rourke smiled. He felt the electric sting as the guard's shock batons hit his back. He welcomed the darkness that swallowed him. He awoke in isolation, not the usual holding pen. This was the dark box, no light, no sound, just cold, recycled air that smelled of ozone and despair. They threw him in here when he was defiant, to break his spirit. But they did not understand. A man who had nothing left had no spirit to break. He was just a body, waiting for the next signal to fight, or the final signal to die. He drifted in the cold, counting his own heartbeats, waiting for the end. It had been 3 days. The grand chamber of the Apex Conclave was choked with incense and ambition. Princess Kalaraya Zelvor, heir to the Zel Dominion, despised this moon. She despised the Kresh Syndicate and the political theater required to keep them in check. She sat on a dais of floating jade, her posture perfect, her expression a mask of serene indifference. Her skin, like all Zel, held a faint pearlescent shimmer, and her eyes, a deep, unsettling violet, missed nothing. "The Syndicate is pleased to offer these assets," boomed the Guildmaster. "A hulking reptilian creature named Vorlog. Acquired legally, of course, to settle outstanding debts." A series of beings were paraded onto the central block, political prisoners, rare fauna, and finally, the gladiators, the champion stock. Kalaraya felt a cold knot in her stomach. Her father's council insisted she attend. "Show unity, daughter. The syndicate's trade routes are vital. Vital, she thought, and built on suffering. And now, Lot 7, Vorlag announced, his voice dripping with theatrical pride. The human, the defiant one, a survivor of 6 years, a prime specimen of earthling rage. The doors opened. Dane Rourke was shoved onto the platform. He was not the clean, oiled warrior from the arena posters. He was a wreck. He was gaunt, chained at the hands and feet, and covered in fresh bruises from the isolation box. He looked half-starved, but his eyes, when he lifted his head to scan the opulent crowd, were not broken. They were furnaces. A magnificent beast, Vorlag purred. We start the bidding at 1,000 strong crystals. A rival duke, known for his cruel appetites, immediately raised his paddle. 1,500, 2,000, another voice called. Kalaraya watched. This was the creature her informants had spoken of, the one who had survived the unsurvivable, the one who spat in the proctor's face. 3,000, the duke snapped, growing impatient. Sold to the Duke of 5 strong crystals. The words, spoken clearly and calmly, cut through the chamber. The bidding stopped. Vorlag turned slowly, his yellow eyes narrowing, believing he had misheard. Princess Kalaraya had not moved. Her hand was not raised. She simply stared at the guildmaster. Princess? Vorlag's voice was a low growl. What trick is this? It is no trick, guildmaster, Kalaraya said, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. It was a beautiful sound, like chiming glass, but it carried the coldness of a vacuum. I am bidding on 5 strong crystals, the exact codified amount listed in the Interstellar Compact. Article 9, Section 4. The established slavery penalty fee for a non-registered, non-dominion species. The room fell into absolute stunned silence. The Duke stared, his mouth open. Vorlag's reptilian skin flushed a dark, angry purple. She had not bid to buy him. She had invoked the penalty clause. She was accusing the Kresh Syndicate, in front of the entire conclave, of illegal trafficking. The 5 crystals were not a price. They were a fine. That is an insult. Princess, Vorlag hissed. This is legitimate salvage stock. Is it? Kalaraya rose slowly, a column of silver and violet silk. My dominion has long tolerated the Syndicate's aggressive expansion. We tolerated your acquisition of salvage. But the compact is clear. Humans are a pre-contact species. They cannot be salvaged. By bidding this fee, I am not buying a slave. I am rectifying a clerical error, guildmaster, and I am collecting the assets. It was a declaration of political war. Everyone knew it. She had publicly challenged the most powerful trade guild in the quadrant. She had used an ancient, obscure law to do it, walking a tightrope of diplomacy that could snap at any moment. Vorlag stared, his mind racing. To deny her would be to admit his guilt. To accept meant admitting the Syndicate was vulnerable. The fee is accepted, Vorlag finally forced out, the words tasting like acid. The human is yours, princess, a curious pet. Kalaraya's gaze did not waver. He is not a pet. She turned her head slightly toward her father's advisors, who looked pale with terror. He is my new attendant. The Dominion is, after all, seeking a new accord with primitive species. He will be an excellent cultural guide. She had just thrown a second grenade. She had brought a savage into the Zell royal court. Her father's counsel would be apoplectic. It was perfect. Dane Rourke stood on the platform, chains heavy on his wrists, and watched the entire exchange. He did not understand the nuances of the language, but he understood power. He understood threats. He had just been transferred from one owner to another. He had watched the violet-eyed woman, She was stunning, in the way a plasma blade is stunning right before it cuts you. She was tall, slender, and moved with a grace that was not human. She had not looked at him. She had looked at the guildmaster. Dane had been a pawn in her game, a publicity stunt. He was angry, he was suspicious, and he was tired. The guards unhooked his floor chains. They left the heavy cuffs on his wrists. They dragged him from the platform, not toward the holding cells, but toward the gleaming jade-lined exit where the princess was waiting. He was her attendant. A new word for slave. The journey to her star cruiser, the Ethelgard, was a blur of hostile stares. The ship itself was a violation of physics, a sleek, blade-like vessel that hummed with quiet, terrifying power. He was shoved into a room, a chamber. It was larger than any cell he had ever seen. There was a bed, a real bed with soft-looking fibers, not a metal slab. There was a panel on the wall, and when he was nudged toward it, water, clean, hot water, sprayed from a nozzle. He resisted. Comfort was a trap. Comfort makes you soft. But the guards, two silent Zell in silver armor, forced him into the cleansing unit. They were efficient, impersonal, and humiliatingly strong. They stripped him of his arena rags, which were burned. They scrubbed him raw. When he emerged, shaking from the shock of cleanliness, new clothes were laid out, simple black trousers and a tunic, made of a fabric so soft it felt like solidified air. He put them on. He hated them. He hated the way they did not chafe his skin. He sat on the edge of the bed. It was soft. He sprang up, as if burned, and chose to stand in the center of the room, his arms crossed, his newly exposed skin raw and hypersensitive. Hours passed. A tray of food slid from a port in the wall. It was not a nutrient paste. It was real food, heated proteins, brightly colored vegetables, and a blue liquid that smelled like fruit. He stared at it, his stomach clenching. He would not eat. He would not accept their comfort. The door to his chamber slid open. Princess Kalaraya entered. She had changed from her formal silks into a dark, functional suit that looked more like a uniform. She was alone. She looked at the untouched food. She looked at him. He was taller than she had expected and even cleaned up. He looked dangerous. His short, dark hair was still damp. The scars on his arms and neck were stark against his clean skin. "You should eat," she said. Her voice was the same, chiming and cold. Dane said nothing. "The nutrient synthesizers on this vessel are the finest in the Dominion. It is not poisoned." He gave a short, harsh laugh. "You just bought me 5 crystals. Princess, I figure poison is probably the appetizer." Kalaraya tilted her head. Her alien beauty was confusing. Her face was humanoid, but the proportions were all wrong. Her eyes were too large, her cheekbones too sharp, her violet irises seeming to shift and focus like a camera lens. "You speak Zell," she observed. "They taught you well in the arenas." "They taught me to understand the masters," he countered. "Helps you learn what kind of beating is coming." She found herself annoyed. He was defiant. He was ungrateful. And yet, she was not repulsed. His sarcasm was a shield, thick and scarred, and it was intriguing. "I did not buy you human. I liberated you. You are, by law, a free being under my protection." Protection. Dane finally looked at her, his eyes blazing with the same fire she had seen on the platform. "You mean I'm your bait? You made your little political statement, and now I'm the stick you're using to poke the hornet's nest. Is that it?" "You are surprisingly astute," she said coolly. "My council is furious. The Kresh Syndicate wants my head. And you are, as you say, the bait. But you are also clean. fed, and not in an isolation box. You will find my service preferable to the alternative." He hated that she was right. He hated that she was beautiful. He found her magnetic, and it terrified him. Her alienness was profound. She did not smell human. She smelled like ozone and something floral he could not name. "And what is my service, princess?" he sneered. "Am I polishing your throne? Or just standing around looking savage to scare your father's friends?" A flicker of a smile touched her lips. It was gone as quickly as it came. "For now, you will stand around and eat. A dead cultural guide is of no use to me." She turned and left. The door slid shut, leaving Dane alone with the smell of her, the untouched food, and the terrifying softness of the bed. He grabbed the food tray and devoured the contents like a starved animal. They were 2 days into the hyperspace jump back to her homeworld, Velthalra. The ship was silent, suspended in the unreal blue-black corridor of faster-than-light travel. Dane had settled into a wary routine. He ate. He slept. He explored his small section of the ship. He was still a prisoner, but it was a gilded cage. He and the princess had not spoken since their first encounter. He saw her guards, but not her. Then the alarm screamed. It was not a sound. It was a physical assault. A high-pitched, warbling cry that vibrated in his bones. The ship lurched, throwing him from his bed. Red lights flashed, bathing the corridor in a bloody strobe. "Hull breach, sectors 7 and 9. A calm, computerized voice announced. "Internal intruders detected. Security protocols engaged." The door to his chamber, which had been locked, slid open, an emergency override. Dane did not hesitate. He was a survivor. He ran into the corridor. It was chaos. 2 of Calaria's silver-armored guards lay dead, their chests blackened by plasma fire. Raiders. They were being boarded in hyperspace. This was not a random attack. This was an assassination, and they had insider knowledge. They knew how to bypass the jump shields. A plasma bolt shrieked past his head. 3 raiders, clad in black, scorched armor, rounded the corner. They were Kresh, syndicate enforcers. Dane grabbed a shock baton from one of the dead guards. He was a gladiator. He was a killer. He met their charge. He moved with a speed that defied his human form. The first raider swung a vibro-axe. Dane ducked, rammed the baton into the Kresh's gut, and triggered the charge. The raider convulsed. Dane ripped the plasma rifle from its spasming hands. He shot the second raider in the throat. The third raised a shield. Dane did not fight like a soldier. He fought like an animal. He threw himself forward under the shield and used the rifle as a club, smashing the raider's helmet visor. He was on his way to the bridge. He did not know why. It was just an instinct. The head of the snake. He found the bridge in chaos. The main viewport was a spiderweb of cracks. Most of the crew were dead, and the princess was fighting for her life. She was not just a politician. She wielded a thin, glowing energy whip, moving with a deadly alien grace. She had taken down 2 raiders herself, but a third, a massive brute, had her cornered. Suddenly, a new explosion rocked the ship, this one from the side, a secondary charge. The viewport did not just crack, it shattered. The vacuum of hyperspace screamed. Alarms blared. Air rushed out of the bridge in a deafening roar. Papers, bodies, and equipment were sucked into the impossible blue-black void. The emergency shield was trying to deploy, a film of gold energy stuttering to life. But it was too slow. Calaria was pulled off her feet. She grabbed a console, her fingers slipping. The raider who had cornered her was sucked out instantly, vanishing in a silent scream. Dane saw it all in a split second. The princess, her eyes wide with terror, her grip failing. He lunged. He tackled her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his feet bracing against the metal strut of a command chair. He was the only thing anchoring her. He felt the impossible pull of the void trying to rip her from his grasp. "Seal it," he roared, though he knew she could not hear him over the noise. She saw what he was doing. She reached, her fingers straining, and slammed her hand onto an emergency panel. The gold shield snapped into place. The roaring stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Dane collapsed, still holding her, his lungs burning. They lay on the floor of the ruined bridge, tangled together, gasping in the thin metallic air. She looked at him. Her expression was one he had never seen before. The mask of the princess was gone. The cold, calculating politician was gone. She was watching him, not as a slave, not as a pet, and not as bait. She was watching him as a man. Later, in the quiet darkness of the damaged ship, they were in her private quarters. The bridge was unusable. The ship had dropped out of hyperspace, wounded and drifting in the deep black. Dane had a long, jagged gash along his ribs, where shrapnel from the viewport had torn through his tunic. It was bleeding. "That needs to be sealed," Calariah said. Her voice was different, quieter. "I've had worse," he said, pressing his hand to the wound. "Do not be a fool." She retrieved a medical kit from a wall panel. "This is not the arena. Infections kill faster than plasma rifles out here." Her quarters were sparse, functional. A bed, a data console, no opulence. "Sit," she commanded. He sat on the edge of a bench. She knelt in front of him. "The tunic. Take it off." He hesitated. Then he pulled the soft fabric over his head. Calariah stopped. She had seen the scars on his arms. She had not seen his torso. It was a roadmap of a brutal life. Knife wounds, plasma burns, whip marks, and the puckered, ugly scar of a syndicate brand high on his chest. Her hands were trembling. She opened the med kit. She took out a dermal regenerator. It was a sleek, silver tool. "This will be cold," she whispered. She pressed the tool to the gash on his ribs. He flinched, not from the cold, but from her touch. Her fingers brushed his skin. He could feel the heat of her, even through the cold of the tool. She worked in silence, her brow furrowed in concentration. He watched her. Her violet eyes, now focused on his wound, were mesmerizing. He could see the pulse in her long, slender neck. He was shirtless, wounded, and alone in a room with the most powerful woman he had ever met. The air was thick with unspoken things. The fight, the vacuum, the way he had held her, the way she was touching him now. She finished sealing the wound. The regenerator hummed, knitting his skin back together, but her hand lingered. Her fingers rested just above his hip, her thumb brushing the hard muscle of his abdomen. She looked up. Her eyes met his. The trembling in her hand had moved to her entire body. He saw it then. Gratitude, fear, and something else. Something deep and confusing and dangerous. She was a princess. He was a slave. She was an alien. He was human. She leaned in. He stopped her. He did not move, but his voice was firm, a low rumble that cut through the tension. "You don't owe me anything, princess." She froze. Her hand snapped back as if she had been burned. She stood up, her mask of cold serenity crashing back into place, but her eyes were wide, her breathing uneven. He had drawn the line. He was not her property. He was not her savior, and he would not be her reward. Calariah stared at him. The man who had cost her 5 crystals. The man who had just saved her life. The man who had just refused her. She nodded, a single sharp, jerky motion. "Get some rest, attendant," she said, her voice brittle. "We have a long way to go." She walked out, the door sliding shut, leaving Dane Rourke alone in the dark, the scent of ozone and alien flowers fading, and the ache in his ribs the only thing that felt real. The Ethelgard limped out of hyperspace, emerging into the blinding white light of the Velthalra system. Dane watched the viewport as the homeworld of the Zell Dominion grew from a star of light into a planet of impossible beauty. It was a world that seemed polished. Swirling oceans of deep sapphire were broken by continents of immaculate, pale green. There was no sprawl, no visible industry, no sign of the grubby chaos he associated with civilization. As they descended, he saw why. The Zell did not build on their world, they built above it. The capital spire was a breathtaking, terrifying monument to their arrogance. It was a single miles-high structure that punched through the atmosphere, a city-stake of glittering, iridescent crystal that refracted the sun's light into a million dazzling, blinding shards. It was beautiful, and it was a fortress. "We are landing at the apex," Kalariah said. She had appeared at his shoulder, her voice regaining its familiar cold command. She wore her formal silver uniform, the plasma burns from the ambush already repaired. Her mask was back in place. "You will remain 2 steps behind me. You will not speak unless I command it. You will not look anyone directly in the eye. Do you understand? Attendant? Don't look. Don't talk. Got it," Dane grunted. "Just be the savage pet." Her violet eyes narrowed. "The raiders on my ship were Kresh, your previous owners. They knew our codes. They knew exactly where to strike. You are no longer just bait. Dane Rourke, you are a walking, breathing accusation. They will try to kill you. My court, on the other hand, will try to dissect you. I am not certain which is worse." The ship docked with a whisper-quiet sigh. The landing bay was vast, filled with other sleek, blade-like ships and uniformed Zell guards. The air smelled sterile, with the same faint ozone scent he associated with Kalariah. The walk to the royal court was a silent torment. The spire was a place of blinding light and deep, cold shadows. The walls were made of the same living crystal, humming with a low-grade energy that made his teeth ache. He saw no security cameras, no sensor grids, but he felt them. He felt 1,000 invisible eyes tracking his every step. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of their boots on the polished floor. It was a tomb. The court of the Zell Dominion was a cavernous amphitheater at the spire's peak. The ceiling was open to the sky, but a shimmering energy shield filtered the harsh sunlight. Dozens of Zell nobles, draped in silks and metallic threads, floated on personal repulsor dais platforms. They watched Kalariah's approach with identical expressions of cold disapproval. A tall, ancient-looking Zell stood on a central platform. His white robes were severe, his skin a paler, almost gray shade of pearl. This, Dane sensed, was her father, Emperor Thorian. "Kalariah!" the Emperor's voice boomed, not with anger, but with a deep, resonating disappointment that was far more chilling. "You return from your diplomatic mission, with cargo." All eyes, hundreds of pairs of violet eyes, swiveled to Dane. He felt their collective gaze like a physical weight, a pressure of pure, unfiltered disdain. "Father," Kalariah said, bowing her head just enough to show respect, but not enough to show submission. "I return with a strategic asset. It is a human." A new voice cut in, sharp and feminine. A Zell woman on a nearby dais, her robes a deep blood red, sneered. "A primitive, a beast of the arenas. You shamed the Dominion by paying the Kresh fine, and then you shamed your bloodline by bringing the thing here. The Kresh Syndicate attacked my vessel in hyperspace." "High Lord Syndra," Kalariah retorted, her voice ringing with sudden steel. "They used Dominion codes. They are not merely slavers, they are traitors. And this human was their prisoner. He knows their methods. He is the key. He is a stain, Sindra hissed. He is, Kalaraya announced, her voice rising to fill the chamber. An ambassador. Dane's head snapped up. He looked at her. She was insane. A ripple of shock passed through the court. An ambassador, the Emperor repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. From a world of savages, a world that survived 6 years of Kresh brutality embodied in one man, Kalaraya said, walking forward, leaving Dane behind. A world we know nothing about. I am opening diplomatic relations, Father, as is my right as your heir. He is here under my personal protection. He is the first Earth ambassador to the Zell Dominion. She was brilliant, Dane thought, with a surge of unwilling admiration. She had turned him from a pet into a political incident. She had shielded herself with protocol. The Emperor stared at his daughter for a long, cold moment. You have creative instincts. Kalaraya. Very well. The ambassador will be given quarters, and he will be studying. The final word hung in the air, a naked threat. The court session dissolved as the nobles floated away on their platforms. One broke from the silent procession. He was a male Zell, younger than the Emperor, but older than Kalaraya. He was unsettlingly handsome, his features perfectly symmetrical, his black and silver robes immaculate. His violet eyes were a shade darker than the others, almost a deep indigo. He moved with a liquid, predatory grace. Sister, he said, his voice a smooth, melodic purr that made the hairs on Dane's arms stand up. You collect the most fascinating strays. Virexel, Kalaraya said. Her tone was flat, all warmth gone. Brother, Virexel's dark eyes slid over Dane, studying him like a prized insect. He's rough, even for a human. The Kresh were not kind to him. The court will not be either. He turned his smile on Kalaraya. He is a liability. Little sister, a single word from me, and I could have him disposed of cleanly. No political fuss, a simple toxin, a regrettable accident. I could do that for you. The offer was genuine. It was a casual offer of murder, a brotherly favor. He is my attendant, Virexel, Kalaraya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Touch him, and I will tear down your entire network of spies, starting with the customs agent on Krill who accidentally cleared your last shipment. Virexel's smile widened. It was a beautiful, terrible thing. As you wish, sister, keep your savage. Let us see who he bites first. He bowed, a mockery of respect, and drifted away. Dane was given chambers. That was the word they used. Chambers. To him, it was a palace. The room was twice the size of his ship quarters. One entire wall was a sheet of transparent crystal, looking out over a dizzying drop. He could see the curvature of the planet below. The bed was a cloud. The air was perfectly temperature-controlled. And it was the most terrifying place he had ever been. He spent the first hour tearing it apart, not in a rage, but with methodical precision. He was not an ambassador. He was bait. Kalaraya had said it herself. He was here to draw out her enemies. He found the first sensor in the light fixture. It was a tiny, shimmering thread. He found the second in the audio modulator that controlled the room's ambient sound. He found 3 more, woven into the very fabric of the wall. They were Zell-Tech, subtle, organic, and everywhere. They were tracking his every movement, listening to his every breath. He was in a cage. A bigger cage, a much prettier cage, but a cage. He was being watched. He was being studied. He lay on the soft bed, fully clothed, and stared at the star-dusted sky through the window wall. He felt a cold, familiar anger. He was being used by the Kresh, by the arena masters, and now by a princess. It was all the same. He closed his eyes and let his senses attune to the room, listening to the subtle hum of the sensors, mapping them in his mind. If he was bait, he would be the most dangerous bait they had ever seen. Night in the spire was not dark. The crystal city glowed with captured internal light, a soft, pearlescent luminescence that turned the sky outside a deep, velvet purple. Dane did not sleep. He could not. The arena had burned that out of him. He rested, but he always listened. That was why he heard it. It was not a sound. It was a change. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the hum of the sensors in his room. A brief, fractional power fluctuation in the corridor outside, in the arenas. A moment's hesitation was death. He was off the bed, moving toward his door, before his conscious mind had even processed the threat. The corridor was empty, bathed in the soft purple light. Silent, too silent. He moved, a shadow in his black tunic, down the hall toward Calaria's chambers. He did not know why. He was not her guard, he was not her friend, but his survival, he knew, was intrinsically linked to hers. If she died, he was, as Virexel had so kindly put it, a stray. Her door was 2 inches ajar, a fatal mistake. No Zelgard would be so careless. He pushed the door. It slid open without a sound. Her chambers were dark. The only light came from the massive window wall, the same as his. He saw 2 figures, silhouettes against the starlight, locked in a deadly silent struggle. It was Calaria in her sleep clothes, a thin white shift. She was fighting with the same desperate, deadly grace he had seen on the ship, armed with a small energy blade that cast a pale blue light. Her attacker was a Zel, clad in the black form-fitting armor of the Royal Guard. But this was not a sparring match. The guard was fighting to kill, armed with a garrote wire, trying to get inside her defense. Dane did not shout. He did not announce himself. He attacked. He hit the guard from the side, a low, brutal tackle aimed at the knees. The guard was Zel, stronger than a human, but the impact was unexpected. The guard stumbled, his focus broken. Calaria did not hesitate. She used the opening, lunging, her energy blade sinking deep into the gap between the guard's helmet and his chest plate. The guard stiffened, a low, electronic hiss escaping his vox emitter. He did not fall. He turned, his helmeted head swiveling to Dane. He was still strong. He raised his armored fist to strike. Dane was already moving. He grabbed the garrote wire the assassin had dropped, looped it, and in a single fluid, practiced motion, wrapped it around the guard's neck and pulled. He put his boot in the small of the guard's back and leveraged all his weight. It was a move from the arena, a killer's move. The Zel thrashed, his superior strength useless against the cold, precise leverage. The guard's head snapped back at an unnatural angle. There was a sickening crack of electronics and vertebrae. The body went limp. Dane and Calaria stood in the sudden absolute silence, chests heaving, breathing in the smell of ozone from her blade. The body of her guard lay at their feet. Calaria looked at Dane. Her face was pale, her large violet eyes wide with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. She was trembling. "You," she started to say. Then the alarms, the real alarms, began to shriek. The door burst open, and the room was flooded with light and silver-armored royal guards, their weapons raised. The cover-up was immediate. It was seamless. By the time the twin sons of Velthalra rose, the incident was already buried. Dane was interrogated, not as a witness, but as a suspect. They put him in a lightless room, but it was not the dark box from Krill. This was a place of soft voices and cold questions. The official story, as he was told by a stern-faced Zel counselor, was tragic. The guard, a loyal but mentally unstable officer, had been driven mad by the presence of the unvetted Earthling. He had suffered a psychotic break. He had attacked the princess in a fit of alien-induced rage. Dane Rourke, the savage, had then, in his own characteristic fit of rage, killed the guard. They blamed Earthling rage. They blamed him. The court had covered its own tracks. An assassin from within their own ranks was unthinkable. A savage human causing chaos. That was perfectly believable. Kalaraya, to his surprise, did not fight it. She sat in the council chamber, her face a mask of stone, and publicly accepted the report. She accepted the regrettable loss of her guard and the unfortunate instability of her new attendant. Dane was released back to his chambers, a prisoner on a longer leash. That night, she came to him. She did not use the door. A panel in his wall slid open, revealing a hidden service corridor. She appeared like a ghost, her face pale, her royal robes shed in favor of a simple, dark blue tunic. She looked at him, and the mask of the princess was gone. Utterly. "They blamed you," she whispered. Her voice was raw. "I'm used to it," Dane said, his voice flat. He was standing by the window, watching the lights of the city far below. "It's a good story. Simple, easy to believe. The animal got loose." "He was my guard," she said, her voice breaking. "He stood outside my door for 5 years. His name was Theron. He had a mate. He had a child." She was shaking. The adrenaline was gone, and the shock was setting in. The betrayal. "He was a good soldier," Dane said quietly. "He almost had you, though, if I hadn't heard the power shift." "He was mine," she choked out. And then, to his utter astonishment, she began to cry. It was not a human sob. It was a silent, shuddering collapse. Her legs gave out, and she slid down the wall, her hands covering her face. He watched her for a long second. This was the woman who had bought him, used him, and lied to the entire Dominion. And she was breaking. With a deep sigh, he crossed the room and sat down on the floor, not next to her, but near her. He did not touch her. He just sat, a solid, silent presence in the room. After a long time, her shudders quieted. She wiped her face, though the tears left shimmering, pearlescent tracks on her skin. "He was bought," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Someone in my court, someone in my family bought him. And they used your arrival as the excuse for his madness. You were the perfect scapegoat." "I know," Dane said. She finally looked at him. Her violet eyes were wrecked, raw with grief and a terrifying vulnerability. "Why did you save me? Again?" "Self-preservation, princess," he lied. "You die, I'm next." Virexel made that pretty clear. She knew he was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. She studied his face, the hard lines of his jaw, the network of scars. "You are not like them. The Zell. You are all rage and heat and solid." He gave a dry chuckle. "On Earth, they just call that alive." She tilted her head, a genuine, desperate curiosity in her eyes. "What are Earth girls like?" The question was so unexpected, so achingly naive, it threw him off balance. He thought for a long moment. He thought of the women he had known before his capture. Barmaids, soldiers, mechanics, women who were tired, tough, and real. "They're loud," he said finally, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And they're angry. And they're soft. And they work too hard. And they're not you." He looked at her, and the distance between them, the few feet of floor, suddenly felt charged with a dangerous electric current. "And," he said, his voice dropping, "they never looked at me the way you do." She did not ask him what he meant. She knew. She did not look at him like a pet, or a savage, or a bodyguard. Not since the ambush, not since the assassin. She looked at him like a man. She uncoiled from the floor and moved, crawling the short distance until she was kneeling in front of him. The air in the room became thick, heavy, hard to breathe. She put one trembling, pearlescent hand on his cheek. Her skin was cool. "Dane," she whispered, his name, not human, not attendant. And then she kissed him. It was not a princess's kiss. It was desperate. It was a raw, aching need. It was the kiss of a woman who had just seen death and betrayal and was clinging to the one solid thing in her world. Her lips were soft, cooler than a human's, and they tasted of salt and ozone. He did not pull away. He was, for that 1 second, just a man. His hand came up, his fingers tangling in her fine, silver-white hair, and he kissed her back. The kiss deepened. It was a fire. It was a drowning. It was a confession. She pulled back, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her eyes luminous in the dark. She was trembling, not with fear, but with a fierce, terrified desire. Her hands went to the clasp of her own tunic. Her fingers fumbled with it. She was undressing, surrendering, offering the only thing she had left. Dane watched her hands shake. He saw the naked hunger in her eyes and the equally naked fear. He put his hand over hers, stopping her. His voice was a raw-edged rasp. "Don't." She froze. Her eyes filled with confusion. Rejection. "I can't," he said, and the words were torn from him. He pulled his hand away, stood up, and walked back to the window, his back to her. He was shaking. "I am not your attendant?" she asked, her voice small, mistaking his meaning. "No," he said, his hands clenching at his sides. He was fighting a war with himself. "It's because I'm not your attendant, because you're not just a woman, and because this room has 6 sensors in it, and we are both dead if we do this." He was torn, not just between desire and survival, but between the animal who wanted to take what was offered and the man who knew it was a poison chalice. He looked at his own reflection in the crystal wall. He saw the savage. He saw the slave. And behind him, he saw the reflection of the princess, kneeling on the floor, her tunic half open. "Go," he said, his voice flat. "Go back through the wall, princess, before your brother or your father or whoever sent that guard gets exactly what they want." For a long time, she did not move. He heard a single sharp intake of breath, then the sound of her rising. The panel slid open. "Good night, Dane Rourke," she whispered. The panel slid shut. He was alone again. He and Calaraya, in their separate, monitored rooms, both lying wide awake in the glowing, silent crystal prison. The air was no longer thick with what they could not say. It was screaming. The weeks following the assassination attempt were a cold war of whispers. The Capitol spire, which had seemed a sterile prison, now felt like a hunting ground. Dane felt the unseen eyes of the censors not just as a presence, but as a judgment. He was the earthling rage, the court's official problem. He was tolerated, but he was watched. Calaraya, in turn, had retreated. She spent her days locked away, poring over data streams, her nights pacing her chambers. The silence that stretched between her room and his, connected by that hidden passage, was louder than any scream. They were allies, bound by blood and secrets, but that night the assassin had drawn a line that was both a bond and a barrier. He had refused her. He had saved her. He had confused everything. One evening, she appeared at his door, not through the passage, but as a formal visitor. She was not in her royal silks or her silver uniform. She wore the plain, dark gray fatigues of a spire engineer. "I am suffocating," she said, her voice flat. "This place, it's all crystal and light, and I have never felt so trapped. I need air. And so do you. Air, Dane repeated, suspicious. Where are we going? Another cultural meeting where I stand and look savage? No, she said. She held up a second bundle of clothes. They were rough, common-looking, the kind of synthetic weave garments worn in the spire's lower levels. We are going to see the real Velthalra, the part the court pretends doesn't exist. She was, he realized, offering him a mission. But beneath that, she was offering him a glimpse of freedom, or her version of it. Disguised, they were no one. He was a low-level maintenance worker, his scars and rough-hewn face blending in perfectly. She had bound her silver hair under a dark cap, and a tint field generator dulled the pearlescent shimmer of her skin. She looked almost human, almost. She was still too graceful, her movements too precise. But in the shadows of the spire's underbelly, they passed. They descended for miles, past the gleaming halls of state, past the residential rings, down into the vast humming foundations of the city. The air grew thick, warm, and humid, smelling of exotic spices, ozone, and unrecycled humanity. The forbidden pleasure market of the gutter was not a place of quiet, sterile beauty. It was a riot of life. Holographic advertisements in a dozen alien languages fought for space, their neon light casting garish, shifting colors on the damp metal walls. The crowd was a dense, pulsing throng of species Dane had only ever seen in arena cells. It was loud, chaotic, and smelled of alien street food, spilled narcotics and sweat. Kalaraya, for the first time since he had met her, looked alive. A faint smile touched her lips as she navigated the chaos. "This is freedom, Dane," she said, her voice low over the din. No titles, no censors, no protocol, just choice. You can buy anything, be anything, for an hour. You can buy a lot of trouble, Dane said, his hand instinctively near his belt, where a vibro knife was hidden. He was not free. He was on high alert. This place felt like the krill pens, just with better lighting. She grabbed his hand. It was not a romantic gesture, that it was a command. "Stop being a gladiator, just for a minute, look." She pulled him toward a stall selling brightly colored, steaming skewers of meat from a creature with too many legs. She bought one, handed it to him. He ate it. It was surprisingly good. She showed him a game of chance, played with floating, light-bending dice. She pointed out a musician playing a 10-stringed harp that seemed to sing with human voices. She was trying to show him her world was not just cold crystal. She was trying to show him her. And then he saw it. It was not loud. It was not bright. It was a simple dark sigil. A merchant, a hulking bat-like creature, was arguing with a Zell dock worker. As the merchant gesticulated, his sleeve rode up. On his wrist was a tattoo, a small black circle with 3 jagged lines. Dane stopped dead. The sounds of the market faded. The blood drained from his face. "Dane!" Kalaraya's voice seemed to come from a long way off. "What is it?" He grabbed her, pulling her into the shadow of an alcove, his grip so tight it hurt. "The brand," he whispered, his voice a raw rasp. "That merchant, on his wrist, that's the Kresh brand, the inner ring mark, the one they give the handlers." Kalaraya's face went pale. That's not possible, and the Kresh have no power here. The syndicate is outlawed on Velthalra." "A brand's a brand, princess," he hissed. "I know my owners. They're here." He pulled her, ignoring her protests, blending with the shadows, moving with the lethal grace of an arena survivor. He tracked the merchant, keeping his head down. The merchant finished his argument and moved deeper into the market, toward a section that was not marked on any public directory. A heavy, reinforced door, guarded by two Zell, not royal guards. These were different. Their armor was unpolished, their energy rifles held with a casual brutality, and on the pauldron of their armor, etched beneath the Zell government insignia, was the same small sigil. "They're the government," Calariah whispered, her voice shaking with dawning horror. "They're slavers," Dane countered. They watched. A cloaked figure, small and trembling, was shoved through the door. A transaction was made. Credits exchanged. "A secret trade," Calariah breathed, her mind piecing it together. The attack on her ship, the assassin from her own guard. "It's not just the creche. It's us, a faction, within my father's government." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. "You're surprised?" Dane's laugh was a bitter, harsh sound. "Empires are built on things like this. Princess, the forbidden trade that funds the polite one." He saw the look on her face. This was not a political game to her anymore. This was a deep, personal rot. The foundation of her perfect crystal spire was built on filth. "We have to go," she said, her voice hardening. "We have to get this to my father." "You think he doesn't know?" Dane asked. Before she could answer, one of the Zell guards turned. His helmeted head swiveled, his visor's optics scanning the shadow where they hid. He had seen them. "Run," Dane said, and this time he pulled her. They fled, swallowed by the chaotic, screaming, vibrant life of the market, the alarm cries of the slaver guards lost behind them. They made it back to the spire, their hearts pounding. Calariah went straight to her console, her face a mask of cold fury. She was locking down her system, searching for answers, her hands flying over the holographic controls. Dane was left in her main chamber, adrenaline still singing in his veins. He was a prisoner again, but this time, he was a prisoner in her frantic, dangerous world. A new person entered the room, a Zell woman, but she was not like the others. She was short for her species, with a scholar's stoop. Her robes were simple, and her silver hair was tied back in a messy, functional knot. This was Yira, Calariah's oldest friend. Yira looked at Dane, her gaze not cold, but appraising, and deeply, profoundly tired. "So," Yira said, her voice quiet, "you are the Earth Ambassador, the one who is going to burn my best friend's life to the ground." Dane tensed. "I'm not here to burn anything. I'm just trying to survive." Yira gave a sad smile. "That is the problem. Calariah thinks she can save you. She thinks she can save everyone. But you cannot save a thing that is already owned. Human." "She's not my owner," Dane said, his voice low. "I am not talking about you," Yira said, stepping closer. "I am talking about her. When we were girls, we would run through the lower levels. The same gutter she probably took you to, thinking it was an adventure. But that was before her anointment, before she became the heir." Yira's violet eyes, a duller, softer shade than Calariah's, held his. "She doesn't belong to herself anymore. Dane Rourke, she belongs to the Dominion. She belongs to the court. She belongs to that." She gestured to the floating, holographic icon of the Emperor. "And neither will you. You are a scandal. You are unseemly. They will use you to control her, or they will use her to destroy you." "What's your point?" Dane asked, respecting her honesty. "My point," Yira said, "is that I love her, and I can see the way she looks at you. It is the first genuine, stupid human thing she has done in 10 years, and it will get her killed. Go, flee, take a ship, disappear. If you care for her at all, you will stop being the weapon they are aiming at her heart." Before he could answer, Calariah shouted from her console room, "I have it, a manifest, A cargo shipment leaving from a private port in the Theronian Mountains. Tonight. It's them. Dane. It has to be. Yera closed her eyes, her face etched in sorrow. The warning had come too late. The mountains were a jagged black wound against the purple sky. The storm was already gathering, static discharging between the peaks in silent, flickering sheets of light. Their unmarked speeder, a high-atmosphere skiff, cut through the air, buffeted by the rising winds. "This is suicide," Dane yelled over the roar of the engines. "We're not soldiers. We're a politician and an ex-gladiator. We don't have a plan." "The plan is suicide," Kalaraya yelled back, her eyes fixed on the navigation display. "It's the one thing they won't expect. My brother Verexel, my father's counsel. They think I'm a coward. They think I'm weak. They're about to find out how wrong they are." That was when the drones appeared. They swarmed from the clouds like metallic insects. 4 of them, small, fast and armed. Slaver drones. They opened fire, plasma bolts searing the air. Kalaraya threw the skiff into a dive, dropping them into a narrow, winding canyon. The chase was brutal and fast. Dane was at the rear-facing energy panel, firing wildly. But the drones were automated, precise, and relentless. A bolt caught the skiff's port engine. It exploded in a shower of sparks. The speeder screamed, spiraling out of control. "Hang on!" Kalaraya shouted, fighting the controls. She managed to pull the nose up just enough. They did not crash. They skidded, plowing through rock and alien scrub, until the skiff slammed to a halt against the wall of a dark, stone structure. They were alive. The skiff was a wreck. The drones were still out there, their searchlights cutting through the rain, which was now lashing down. "Inside. Now!" Dane grabbed her arm and pulled her from the cockpit. The structure was an old, abandoned mountain lodge, a relic from a time when Zell nobles roughed it. The door was unlocked. They fell inside, slamming it shut just as the first plasma bolt struck the stone facade. They were trapped. The lodge was dark, cold. The wind howled outside, a living thing. The storm had broken a full-force electrical gale. The drones were circling, but the wind was too strong for them to hold a position. They were safe, for now. They stood in the darkness, soaked, bruised, and panting, the adrenaline of the crash fading, leaving something else in its place. "Well," Dane said, his voice echoing in the large, empty room. "This is a new kind of cage." Kalaraya just stared at him. The water from her hair was tracing pearlescent tracks down her face. And then she laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated adrenal overload. It was the sound of something breaking. "This is insane," she gasped, her hands coming up to her face. "My entire life is a lie. My government is trading slaves. My brother wants me dead. And I am trapped in a box on a mountain with a human eye. With a human." She did not finish. She did not need to. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He did not know what he was doing. He just knew that Yera was wrong, and Yera was right. He put his hands on her shoulders. She was shaking. "Kalaraya," he said, and her name felt strange on his tongue. "They're going to kill us," she whispered, looking up at him, her violet eyes wide, all the walls gone. "Or they'll kill you. And it will be my fault. Yera told you, didn't she? That I was poisoned." "I've been called worse," he said, his voice rough. "I am. So afraid," she admitted. It was a confession that cost her more than the truth about the slavers. "Me too," he said. The storm outside raged. The wind shrieked, but in the cold, dark lodge, there was only the sound of their breathing. He looked at her mouth, still wet from the rain. He remembered the kiss in his chamber, the one he had stopped. He saw the censors, the court, the politics. and he saw the drones outside. Survival. He realized in that second that Yera had been wrong. Staying with Kalaraya was not a death sentence. Leaving her, that was death. Leaving her was going back to being an animal in a cage. He touched her face, his calloused thumb brushing her cheek. You're not poisonous. You're the only real thing in this whole damn spire. This time, when she leaned in, he met her halfway. The kiss was not desperate and afraid. It was a discovery. It was raw and hot, and it tasted like a storm. He pulled her close, his hands tangling in her wet hair, and hers clutched at his tunic, as if she was drowning and he was the only solid land. There was no bed, just a pile of old discarded furs in front of a cold fireplace. It did not matter. Their first night together was a slow, quiet collision of worlds. It was the undoing of every rule. He was a human. She was a Zell. His skin was hot, scarred, and rough. Hers was cool, smooth and shimmering, even in the faint light of the storm. It was an exploration, clumsy and real, of boundaries breaking. Every touch was a question, every kiss an answer, in the deepest, quietest moment, when they were tangled in the furs and the storm had quieted to a low, distant rumble. He stopped. He held her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him, to see him. I'm not your property, he whispered, and it was not an accusation. It was a statement. It was the one truth he had to claim. Kalaraya looked at him, her luminous eyes clear and unwavering. She put her hand over his, pressing his palm to her cheek. You never were. And when he came undone inside her, it was not a surrender. It was a victory. The morning was painfully bright. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean. The lodge was silent, save for the drip of water from the damaged roof. Kalaraya awoke first. She was curled against him, her head on his chest. For a long, blissful, stupid moment, she felt peace. She felt the simple animal warmth of him, the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. Then she opened her eyes. She was braver, a new strength settling in her bones. She was softer, the brittle edges of the princess worn away. And she was more afraid than she had ever been in her life. She had, in a single night, forged something she would kill to protect. Dane stirred, his gladiator's instinct sensing her movement. He looked at her, and his eyes were clear. No regret, no fear, just him. They dressed in the silence of a shared new world. They were a team. We need to get the comms working, she said, her voice practical, though her hands shook as she fastened her tunic. It took them an hour. The skiff's comms unit was damaged, but Dane managed to splice a power cell to the emergency beacon. It crackled to life, but it was not a live feed. It was a message queue. A single message, flagged with the imperial crest, was waiting. It was from her father. She played it. The Emperor's voice was cold, digital, and absolute. Kalaraya returned to the spire, at once, alone. Dane, who was cleaning his knife, looked up. Alone? That sounds familiar. Wait, Kalaraya said, her finger tracing a secondary file attached to the message, a private, encrypted addendum. She opened it. The Emperor's voice was different, softer, almost paternal. Which was worse? Daughter, the human ambassador has become a severe security risk. The court is in unrest, for his own safety and for the stability of the Dominion. He will be relocated to a diplomatic holding facility. He is no longer your concern. Dane let out a short, harsh laugh. Relocated. That's the word they use before they space you. A holding facility. Just a bigger, colder cage. He can't, Kalaraya whispered, her newfound bravery turning to ice. He is under my protection. He can, Dane said, his voice flat as he stood up. I'm the savage who killed your guard. I'm the human who corrupted the princess. You made me an ambassador, Kalaraya, but your court just made me a scapegoat. Your rivals. They're not just sensing weakness. They've been waiting for this. They know I'm with you. She tried to open a channel. To her father. To the court. Blocked. All channels were blocked, except one. A new message slipped through. Not from her father. From Virexel. It was a text-only note, casual and deadly. Dearest sister, father is very disappointed. The court is concerned. Your attachment to the primitive is unseemly. Come home. Let us clean up your mess. The trap was sprung. He was offering her a deal. Her life, her title. For Danes. She looked at the message. She looked at the man standing in the ruins of the lodge. She was a princess, an heir, and a politician, and for the first time, she truly understood what Yera had meant. She did not belong to herself, and now they were trying to take him too. The silence in the mountain lodge was heavier than the wreckage of their skiff. Virexel's message hung in the air, a digital death sentence. Let us clean up your mess. Kalaraya stared at the comm unit, her face a mask of porcelain. The bravery of the morning, the softness of the night, it all evaporated, leaving a cold, hard core of royal fury. No, she whispered, not to Dane, but to the message. Kalaraya, Dane said, his voice low and practical. He was already checking the wrecked skiff's power cells. This isn't a fight. This is a trade. He's offering you your life back. All you have to do is hand over the primitive. She turned to him, and her violet eyes were not the eyes of the woman he had held. They were the eyes of the princess who had bought him for 5 strong crystals. They were calculating, cold, and utterly terrifying. He thinks I am weak, she said. He thinks I am my father's daughter, a creature of political pressure. He thinks I will choose the spire over a life. You should, Dane said, forcing the words out. This is your world, your throne. I'm just cargo. I've been cargo before. I know the drill. Stop talking, she commanded. She strode over to him. She was not trembling. She was vibrating. They will not take you. They will not relocate you. They will not have you. Before he could argue, before he could tell her it was a suicide play, the sky outside the lodge filled with a new sound. Not the wind. The clean, high-pitched whine of Dominion repulsor engines. 2 Royal Guard skiffs, gleaming silver, descended from the clouds. They were not slavers. They were not drones. This was an official arrest. He found us, Dane said, his hand going to his vibro knife. No, Kalaraya said, her hand closing over his. Don't fight, not this way. This is not a battle. This is protocol. And I know the protocol. The lodge door hissed open. 6 royal guards, in immaculate silver armor, entered. They did not raise their weapons. They were led by a high-ranking Zell counselor, the same one who had interrogated Dane after the assassin's attack. Princess Kalaraya, the counselor said, his voice devoid of emotion. By imperial decree, you are to return to the spire. The attendant is to be transferred to the diplomatic corps for reassignment. Reassignment, Kalaraya repeated, her voice pure ice. How very clean, counselor. It is for the ambassador's safety, princess, the counselor said, his gaze sliding to Dane. He is, as you know, a disruptive element. Dane saw the whole game. They were separating them. They would take her back to the spire, where she would be a prisoner of her station, and they would take him. somewhere else. I will go, Dane said, stepping forward. He looked at Kalaraya, a long, hard look. He was trying to tell her something and to survive. Don't be stupid and don't die for me. She understood. She let him go. The guards put binders on him, not chains. These were high-energy cuffs. They were polite. They were respectful. It was the most terrifying arrest he had ever experienced. I will see you in the spire, Ambassador, Kalaraya said, her voice a perfect regal monotone. It was a promise. They put him on one skiff. They put her on another. As his skiff lifted off, he watched hers turn and head back toward the crystal tower. He was alone again, a prisoner of a different, more sophisticated empire. They did not take him to the spire. They took him up, past the capital, past the orbiting stations to a small, dark, unmarked satellite that hung in the planet's shadow. It was disguised as a defunct communications array. It was a black site. The lie of the diplomatic envoy mission was thin, and it dissolved the moment the cell door shut. This was not the dark box on Krill. This was worse. It was a room of pure, blinding white light. There was no sound, just a low, sub-audible hum that vibrated his bones and made his teeth ache. For 2 days, they let him sit. Just the light, just the hum. It was designed to break a mind, to unspool it. On the 3rd day, the interrogator came. It was not Virexel. It was a Zell psych proctor, a creature of soft robes and a softer voice. Dane Rourke, the proctor said, his violet eyes full of false sympathy. We are simply trying to understand. The princess, she is compromised. We need to know how you did it. The torture was not a plasma burn or a shock baton. It was precise, and it was psychological. Did you use earth pheromones? The proctor asked, his voice calm. We have records of primitive species using biochemical warfare to influence higher minds. Dane said nothing. He focused on the pain in his left knee, a place where the Zytrek had once hit him with a mace. He centered his mind on that pain, a familiar anchor. Or was it a psychic manipulation? The proctor continued. Your species is known for its unstructured rage, a blunt but effective mental instrument. Did you force her to feel for you? They could not conceive of her choosing him. It was a failure in their logic. He was a bug. The system was broken. They needed to find the virus. When he would not speak, they used a neurotoxin. It did not cause pain. It caused memories. He was back in the arena, the sand in his mouth, the Zytrek's blood on his knife. He was back on Earth, his old barracks. The day the treaty was signed, he saw his CO shaking the Kresh diplomat's hand, selling out the colony on Cygnus 5. He screamed, but he said nothing. On the 4th day, they showed him a recording. It was Kalaraya. She was in the royal court, dressed in heavy formal armor. She was renouncing him. The human Dane Rourke, her voice said, flat and recorded, was a mistake, a tool of the syndicate, sent to destabilize my court. He has been dealt with. Dane watched the recording. He saw the flicker in her eyes. He saw the way her left hand, a Zell tick for distress, was clenched at her side. She has renounced you, the proctor said gently. It is over. Just tell us who your Kresh contact was. Tell us, and we will let you go. The recording was a fake, or if it was real, it was forced. He knew it. He knew her. That night in the lodge. That was real. The rest was just a show. She came for me, he whispered, lost in the memory of the assassin. No one is coming for you, human, the proctor said, his patience finally snapping. He signaled the guards. He is resistant. Use the deep field. This time, the pain was real. It was an energy field that boiled his blood, lit up every nerve ending. He was bleeding from his nose, his eyes, his ears. He was hallucinating. But he did not break. He was a gladiator. He knew how to die. Back in the spire, Kalaraya was a prisoner. She was in her chambers, surrounded by luxury, and she had never been more trapped. Her father had confined her for her own protection. Yira was her only contact, a silent, sad-eyed jailer who brought her food. "He's alive, isn't he?" Kalaraya asked, her voice a rasp. She had not slept. "He is on satellite Epsilon 9, Yira whispered, placing the tray down. "The old comms array, it is a black site, Kalaraya, a re-education center, Virexel's personal project." A cold, pure rage, unlike anything she had ever known, flooded Kalaraya's system. It was a very human rage. "My brother is cleaning up my mess," she said, her voice shaking. "Get me to my private console, the one my mother built." Yira's eyes went wide. "That is treason, to even activate it." "What do you think this is?" Kalaraya swept her arm, indicating the room. "The spire. The lie. This is treason. They arrested an ambassador. They are torturing him. They are breaking the very laws they swore to protect. Get me to that console." Yira nodded. She led Kalaraya to a hidden panel behind a water garden. The console was dark, ancient, Zell technology, but from a different, more rebellious age. Kalaraya placed her hand on it. "Threx," she whispered. "Awaken. Code Ethelgard 090. The console flickered to life. A voice, not a calm, computerized Zell voice, but a chaotic, multifaceted, and gleefully insane one, filled the room. "Oh, princess," the voice sang, a dozen different tones at once. "You finally called. I've been so bored. The court's new fire suppression protocols are dreadfully dull. Are we burning something down? Please say we are." "Threx," Kalaraya said, her voice all in command. "I need a ship, unmarked, fast, and I need the schematics for Epsilon 9, now." "Ooh, Epsilon 9, Threx chirped. "Virexel's little box of screams, a dreadful piece of architecture, all function, no flare. I can get you in, but it's a treason charge, Your Highness. A kill-on-sight kind of party." "Get me in," Kalaraya said. "As you wish." Threx's voice became sharp, focused, and deadly. "I have an idea. We will use the old diplomatic route, the one your dear brother uses for his cargo." Kalaraya stole the ship herself, with Threx running digital interference, looping security feeds, and opening blast doors. She walked onto a private landing bay, right past her brother's personal guards, and boarded a sleek, black smuggling ship. It was a thing built for speed and silence. She flew it herself, Threx's voice in her ear, guiding her through the old, forgotten smuggling corridor. A navigational hazard that was, as Threx put it, a lovely chaotic mess. The jailbreak was not elegant, it was brutal. "I am slicing their external codes," Threx announced, its voice buzzing in her helmet. "But they have a lovely little self-destruct on tamper failsafe. So, we must be quick. I am going to give you a 3-minute window. Princess, I will create a distraction." The distraction was Threx spoofing a Kresh Syndicate armada, making it appear on the satellite's long-range sensors. Epsilon 9 went into full battle alert as plasma cannons fired blindly into the void. Kalaraya's small ship, now piggybacking on the satellite's own energy signature, docked hard at a maintenance airlock. "They're on to us!" Threx shrieked with delight. "The Big Brother protocol is active. Virexel knows. How exciting. Go, go, go!" Kalaraya blew the airlock. She was in a black void suit, her energy whip on her belt, a plasma rifle in her hands. She moved, not like a princess, but like a wraith. The satellite was chaotic. Alarms, guards running. Threx was in her ear. Left, left, ignore the guards. They are worried about the creche. Right, down the shaft. Cell block Gamma. Oh, and by the way, he's in cell 427, and his life signs are suboptimal. You might want to hurry. She found the cell block. It was a ring of white, sterile light. 2 guards, Zell proctors, were in the process of dragging a body out of cell 427. Dane. Kalaraya did not announce herself. She opened fire. The plasma bolts hit the 2 proctors in the back. They crumpled without a sound. Dane was on the floor, a bloody, hallucinating wreck. The deep field torture had left him bleeding from the nose and ears. His tunic soaked. He was muttering, his eyes unfocused, seeing things that were not there. The treaty sold us out, he whispered to the white floor. Sand, all just sand. Kalaraya ran to him, her heart seizing. He was so broken. This was her fault. The cell door began to slide shut, a lockdown protocol. She shot the mechanism, shorting it out. She dropped to her knees beside him. Dane, she said, her voice cracking. He looked up, his eyes struggling to focus. He saw a figure in a black armored suit, light streaming in from the corridor behind. A Valkyrie, a ghost. She pulled off her helmet, her silver hair spilling out. Her face was streaked with sweat, her violet eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen. He blinked. It was her. It was not a hallucination. You came for me, he whispered, the words a raw, bloody croak. She did not say anything. She just leaned down, her hands framing his face, and kissed him. It was not a kiss of tenderness. It was a kiss of pure, unadulterated fury, of terror, and of a love so possessive it was a physical force. It was a kiss that tasted of salt, tears, and ozone. She was breathing life back into him, demanding he stay. She pulled back, her forehead resting against his. I didn't fall for Earth, she whispered, her voice thick with tears and rage. I fell for you. Enemy ships, Threx chirped in her ear. Virexel's personal destroyer. We have perhaps 45 seconds. Get up, Kalaraya commanded, pulling Dane to his feet. He was a dead weight. She slung his arm over her shoulder. You are not dying here, Ambassador. That is an order. They fought their way back. He was barely conscious, but his gladiator instincts took over. He grabbed a plasma pistol from a dead guard, and he moved, firing blindly, letting her guide him. They made it to the ship. Kalaraya threw him into the co-pilot's chair and sealed the airlock, diving for the controls. Threx, get us out! Oh, with pleasure. Hold on to your royal dignity. The small ship shot out of the docking bay just as plasma fire from Virexel's destroyer turned the satellite into a ball of expanding gas. Into the asteroid belt, Kalaraya yelled, jamming the accelerator. I'm already going there, Threx sang. They dived into the dense, chaotic field of rock and ice. The larger destroyer could not follow. They were safe, for now. On the wounded ship, drifting in the shadow of a massive asteroid. Kalaraya worked. She had him on the floor of the cockpit, his blood staining the metal. She was using her med kit, the same one from the Ethel Guard, sealing his wounds, pumping him full of stabilizers. Threx, she said, her voice low. You downloaded the Epsilon 9 mainframe. Tell me. Oh, it's juicy. The AI's voice was sober now. Virexel isn't just a slaver, princess. He's a revolutionary. The entire forbidden pleasure market trade, the creche, it's all a front. He's been funding a secret private army. He's planning a coup. He's going to cleanse the Dominion. Kalaraya's hand stopped. A coup. Against my father. Ah, about that, Threx said almost gently. The data, it's complex, the slaver trade, the funding, the black site, the audit trails, well, Princess, they lead back to your father. The Emperor is involved. Kalaraya felt the floor drop out from under her. It was not a rot in her government. It was the government itself, her father. He was letting Virexel do this. Dane's eyes fluttered open. He had been listening. He saw the look on her face, the pure, shattering devastation. Empires, he rasped, his voice raw. She looked at him. He was the only thing that was not a lie. He sold me out, she whispered. Welcome to the club, Dane said. He took a breath, the stabilizers kicking in. He sat up, wincing. I wasn't just a gladiator, Kalaraya. That's just what they put on the posters. Before, I was a soldier. She stared at him. An Earth ambassador, a soldier. Part of the 1st Expeditionary Force. We were protectors. We thought, on a colony called Cygnus 5, we were allies with the local government. He laughed, a sound of self-loathing. Then the Kresh showed up. They wanted the colony's mining rights, our own command, Earth. They made a trade treaty and they sold Cygnus 5. They sold us out. I fought. I wouldn't stand down. That's how I ended up in their arenas. A deserter. He looked at her, his eyes clear and sharp, the hallucinations gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. I hate slavers, I hate empires, and I hate men who sit on thrones and sell out their own. She saw it. His past, her present. They were the same story. Virexel is planning his coup, she said, her voice finding its steel again. He's using the slave trade to fund it, and my father is letting him. They're both monsters. So what do we do, Princess? Dane asked. He got to his feet, unsteady, but standing. Kalaraya Zelvor stood up. She was no longer a princess. She was no longer an heir. She was a rebel. She was a woman who had just torn down a prison. We stopped them, she said. We stopped the coup. We stopped the slavers. We stop all of it. Together. He took her hand. He was scarred and bloody. Hers was cool and steady. Together, he agreed. The capital spire of Velthalra was a city holding its breath. The Grand Royal Summit had choked its sterile corridors with noise, color, and suspicion. Banners of 100 alien delegations hung from the crystal archways, their vibrant silks a garish contrast to the spire's cold, pearlescent light. Ships from every quadrant of the Dominion crowded the docking rings, each one meticulously scanned, each diplomat shadowed. The air, usually still and scented with ozone, was now thick with competing perfumes, whispered deals, and the palpable tension of an empire on edge. Into this theater of paranoia, they returned, their black smuggling ship, a vessel Threx had liberated from Virexel's own private fleet, docked at a commercial trade platform, far from the royal bays. Threx's forged credentials were masterpieces of mundane bureaucracy. They were not royalty. They were not rebels. They were just noise. Lord Envoy Rourke of the Terran Protectorate. Threx's voice chirped in Dane's earcom. You are here to discuss new trade routes for Earth-grown proteins. Do try to sound boring. And Princess, you are subaltern Kalia of the Cygnus delegation. A very, very junior attaché. Your job is to look overwhelmed. It should not be a stretch. Kalaraya, her silver hair dyed a dull, mousy brown and her sharp Zell features softened by a subtle holographic filter, said nothing. She wore the drab gray uniform of a low-level diplomat. She looked like a ghost, a pale imitation of her own power. Dane, by contrast, had been transformed. Calariah had spent the last of their credits on his disguise, and the irony was almost suffocating. He was wearing tailored robes of deep, ambassadorial blue. The cut was precise, the collar high and stiff, designed by a princess who knew exactly what scars needed to be hidden. The Kresh brand on his chest, the whip marks on his neck. They were gone, buried beneath the very image Calariah had invented for him in the royal court. He was, for the first time, truly the Earth Ambassador. The grand reception was held in the Hall of Converging Stars, a room so vast its ceiling was a living map of the galaxy. Nobles, diplomats, and guild masters drifted in their prescribed social orbits. Dane felt the familiar pre-fight coldness in his gut. This was just another arena, a different kind of sand, a different kind of animal. "Subaltern," he said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone he had been rehearsing for 3 days. He offered Calariah his arm. "Try not to look like you're about to assassinate someone." She looked at him, and for a second, her mask cracked, a flicker of their night in the lodge. "And you," she whispered, "try not to be assassinated. These are the same people who wanted you dissected." "This time," Dane said, stepping into the light, "I'm the one holding the knife." He did not mean it literally. He had no weapons. He was the distraction. The charm was a weapon he had not known he possessed. The nobles, who had once looked at him as a savage, were now utterly fascinated by the Lord Envoy. He was human, a novelty. He was witty, a surprise, and he was, in their eyes, safe. He was the pet, returned to the party, but this time wearing a diamond collar. Lord Rourke, slurred a duke, the same one who had bid 3,000 patrons for him on Krill. "You seem familiar. Have we?" "I have that effect on people, Your Grace," Dane said, his smile never touching his eyes. He accepted a flute of shimmering blue liquid. "It is an earth trait. We are indelibly memorable. It is both a blessing and a curse." The Duke laughed, pleased. "Witty. I had heard your kind were brutes." "Only when provoked, Your Grace," Dane said, his gaze drifting over the Duke's shoulder, checking the room. "Like any civilized species." He moved through the crowd, a soldier on patrol. He charmed a high-ranking Zell cleric by asking about theological architecture. He disarmed a group of formidable-looking matriarchs by complimenting their choice of gravitational jewelry. He was an actor, playing the part of his own legend. He kept their attention, drew their focus, a human lightning rod for the court's shallow curiosity. He was hiding his scars, both the ones on his skin and the one in his soul, and he was doing it flawlessly. While Dane held the stage, Calariah became invisible. She was a junior attaché. No one looked at her. No one spoke to her. She was a shadow, her gaze fixed on the floor, her movements timid. She drifted, as if lost, from the grand hall, down a service corridor, her heart pounding a violent rhythm against her ribs. Her target was not the main server. That was for the public. Her target was the Imperial Core, her father's private console, tucked away in the Royal Observatory 2 levels above. It was air-gapped, isolated, and she knew. It held the originals of every command he had ever given. She used her lost persona perfectly. A silver-armored royal guard, one she did not recognize, stopped her. "This is a restricted wing. Subaltern," the guard said, his voice a metallic monotone. Calariah looked up, her holographic disguise making her eyes seem wide and watery. "Oh, forgive me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was just the stars. I have never seen a Zell observatory. On Cygnus, we just have dust." The guard softened. Azel's pride in the spire was a predictable weakness. "It is the heart of the Dominion," he said stiffly. "It is beautiful," she breathed. You must be so proud to guard it. She was a politician's daughter. She knew how to seduce with ego, a far more potent tool than the flesh. The guard puffed up, his armor creaking slightly. It is a great honor, he began. His internal calm crackled. Report, a voice demanded. We have a censor ghost at the main diplomatic gate. Threx, right on cue. The guard was torn. Duty, and the strange, complimentary little attaché. Please, Calariah said. Go. I can find my way back. Your work is clearly so important. The guard, pleased and flustered, nodded sharply. Do not wander again, subaltern. He marched off. The moment he was gone, the lost mousy attaché vanished. The princess moved. She bypassed the guard's sensor net, her hand keying in a code that was 2 generations old. Her mother's code. The observatory was dark, the ceiling a transparent dome showing the endless, swirling black of hyperspace routes. The console was a single obsidian plinth. She laid her hand on it. Threx, she whispered. I am in, and I am with you, princess. The AI's voice sang in her ear, bypassing the new security. Oh, lazy, Virexel, he just layered his protocols on top of your mother's. Such sloppy work. Now, what are we looking for? The coup, Calariah said, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. The slaver trade, the order for Epsilon 9. She found it. It was not hidden. It was archived. It was a complete, detailed plan. A shadow ledger of argon crystals traded for cargo. A list of Kresh-funded terror cells. A strategic map for a full-scale military coup, set to begin in 24 hours. And at the bottom of it all, the final authorization, the plan for the cleansing. The order to remove the emperor and install a new, pure line of succession. But the signature, it was not her father's. Threx, she whispered, her blood turning to ice. The authorization. Who? Oh. Threx's voice was quiet. Oh, my princess. That is the imperial seal. Yes, but the genetic stamp. It is not your father's. It is... Wait. It is a match. A partial match. A filial match. I always admired my mother's security protocols. The voice was not in her ear. It was in the room. Calariah froze. She turned, her hand instinctively moving for a weapon she did not have. Virexel stood in the shadows of the doorway. He was not in his formal robes. He was in a black, high-collared military uniform she had never seen before. He had not been at the reception. He had been waiting. She built this room to be a fortress of truth, Virexel purred, stepping into the starlight. A pity she wasted its secrets on a sentimentalist like her husband, and a fool like her daughter. It's you, Calariah breathed, the pieces slotting into place with sickening speed. The data, the partial genetic match, the voice on the comms from the mountain lodge. It was never my father. He is not involved. You are framing him. Virexel laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Framing? No. Father is compromised. He is weak. He let the Dominion be diluted by things like you're human. He believes in diplomacy. He is a relic. I am not framing him. Little sister, I am succeeding him. Sister? Calariah's mind was reeling. Oh, did he never tell you? Virexel smiled, a smile of pure predatory indulgence. Father had many indiscretions in his youth. Before my mother, I am simply the most successful one. I am his son, Calariah, his firstborn, hidden in the shadows, waiting, while you, the legitimate heir, played princess in the light. He was her half-brother, the true mastermind. The rot was not in the government. The rot was in her bloodline. "The slavers," she whispered. "The coup. It is all you. You are destroying our house." "I am cleansing it," he snapped, his voice losing its purr, replaced by a zealot's fire. "The Dominion is dying, choked by alien influences. I am cutting out the disease. And you were my greatest tool." He strode toward her, his dark eyes burning. "You brought the primitive to our very home, the perfect symbol of the rot. You thought you were a rebel. You were my pawn. You freed a slave and fell in love. You thought that made you noble." He was inches from her now, his face a mask of contempt. "It just made you a fool." "Where is he?" Calariah demanded, her voice a low hiss. "The human?" Virexel's smile returned. "He is concluding his performance. He plays the diplomat so well, but I am afraid his charm has just run out." The observatory doors slid open. Two guards, clad in Virexel's personal black matte armor, entered, and between them, they dragged Dane. He was not the charming ambassador. He was the gladiator. He was bleeding from a split lip. His fine blue robes were torn, the high collar ripped away, exposing the ugly puckered scar of the Kresh brand for all to see. The fight had been fast. They had taken him in the middle of the party. "Bait," Dane spat, his eyes locking on Virexel. "You used me as bait. Again." "We all use what we have, gladiator," Virexel said. He ran a finger along the console, admiring his own reflection. "And now, I will use you as a symbol, a martyr of a sort, for my new dominion." He looked at Calariah, and his plan was clear in his cold indigo eyes. "The grand coronation is tomorrow," he said. "A celebration of 1,000 years of dominion rule. It will be a momentous day. The court will be assembled. My armies are in place, and just as Father begins his speech, he will be attacked." He gestured to Dane, a savage. The Earth ambassador, driven mad by his primitive rage, will attempt to assassinate the Emperor. A tragedy, of course. "They will stop him," Calariah said, her voice shaking. "Oh, yes," Virexel agreed. "He will be executed on the spot. A fine public display, justice, and the court, reeling from this primitive threat, will demand a new leader, a stronger leader, one who is not afraid to cleanse the filth." He turned his gaze, cold and possessive, on Calariah. "And you, little sister, will be my greatest supporter. You will stand on that dais, at my side. You will watch. You will be the grieving, loyal daughter, the symbol of our family's strength. You will endorse my ascension. Or you will be tried as his co-conspirator. The choice is yours." The black-armored guards bound Calariah's hands. They did not take her to a cell. The coronation hall was a chasm of polished stone and arrogant, golden light, built to make even emperors feel small. The air hummed with the sound of 1,000 subsonic pipes, a song of imperial power. Every noble, every diplomat, every high lord of the Dominion was present. Calariah was on the main dais, a gilded platform overlooking the masses. She was a prisoner, but her cage was magnificent. She had been forced into her full ceremonial royal armor. It was a masterpiece of articulated silver and violet metal, heavy, restrictive, and breathtaking. A helmet, open-faced, crowned her head, her dyed brown hair now washed clean, her silver hair a beacon of her bloodline. She stood to the left of her father, the Emperor, who looked tired and old, blissfully unaware. To her right, in a gleaming military uniform, stood Virexel, his face a mask of solemn duty. She was silent. She was a statue. She was forced to stand and watch. A horn blew, a deep, resonating blast. The music stopped. And now, Virexel's voice boomed, amplified by the hall. We deal with the traitor. Two black armored guards dragged Dane from a side entrance. He was not in robes. He was stripped to the waist, his scars, his brand, all of his brutal history on display. He was bound in heavy, glowing energy chains. They forced him to his knees in the exact center of the hall, a single, defiant human shape in a sea of alien aristocracy. Calaria's hands, hidden in her armored gauntlets, clenched until her own nails drew blood. She could not move. She could not speak. A dozen plasma rifles, hidden in the architecture, were trained on her. Virexel's final silent threat. She watched the man she loved, the man she had pulled from the arena, the man she had held in the storm, kneel in chains. This primitive, Virexel began, his voice dripping with righteous sorrow, in an act of unimaginable savagery, plotted to assassinate our emperor, to plunge the Dominion into chaos. Dane looked up. He did not look at Virexel. He did not look at the emperor. He looked past them all, his gaze finding hers. He was not beaten. He was not afraid. He was furious. Calaria stood in her beautiful cage, her heart a dying star, and met his gaze. She was a princess. She was a soldier, and she was being forced to watch him die. The coronation hall was a pit of sound. 1,000 nobles, their voices a unified, bloodthirsty baying, chanted for the execution. Virexel stood center dais, his arms raised, basking in the terrible power he had cultivated. For his treason, he boomed, his voice magnificent and false. The Earth Ambassador will pay the price. He will be cleansed in plasma, a warning to all primitives who dare touch the glory of the Zell Dominion. He lowered his arm, a sharp, clean signal. On the floor, the two black armored guards beside Dane raised their plasma rifles, aiming not to kill but to execute. A slow, agonizing burn. Dane, kneeling, his head bowed, looked up. His gaze was not on his executioners. It was in Calaria. She stood trapped in her silver armor, a living statue of grief. The plasma rifles in the walls trained on her heart. His eyes met hers, and he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Now. As the guards' rifles began to whine, charging their plasma cells, Dane moved. He was not a diplomat. He was not a soldier. He was a gladiator. And a gladiator always has one last trick. He slammed his clenched fist, which he held against his chest, into the central locking unit of the energy chains. The tiny ceramic-cased plasma breach charge, the one Yura had sewn into the rags he now wore, detonated. It was not a large explosion, it was a crack, a blinding flash of white light and a concussive force shockwave that turned the energy chains into superheated shrapnel. The two guards nearest him were thrown back, their armor smoking, their rifles discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. For one single crystallized second, the coronation hall fell silent. Dane Rourke was standing, free. His chest was bleeding where the charge had seared his skin, but he was alive. "Treason!" Virexel roared, his mask of the statesman gone, replaced by the snarl of a warlord. "Kill him! Kill him now!" The black-armored guards on the dais, Virexel's private army, snapped their rifles up, not at the stage, at Dane. They fired. A dozen plasma bolts, streaks of searing green light, lanced across the hall. "No!" Calaria moved. She was no longer a statue. She was a projectile. She leaped from the dais, a 5-meter drop, her ceremonial armor taking the impact. She landed on the hall floor, a ringing crash of metal on stone between Dane and the plasma fire. The bolts struck her. The energy sizzled against her armor, the silver and violet metal glowing white-hot. The force of the impacts threw her back into him, and they both collapsed. But the armor held. She had shielded him. "She is the traitor," Virexel screamed, his plan disintegrating into chaos. "She is with him, Arrest her! Arrest them both! He is the traitor, Kalaraya's voice, amplified by her helmet, blasted through the hall. She rose to one knee, her armor smoking. She pointed a silver-plated gauntlet, not at the guards, but at her half-brother. Virexel Zelvor, he is the slaver. He is the assassin. He planned this coup. The hall erupted. It was not a riot. It was a civil war. In an instant, Virexel's black guards, who had been hidden in the alcoves, ignited their jetpacks, soaring into the air, their energy spears crackling. They were an army of shadows. But the Emperor was not undefended. From the walls, the true royal guard, the telekinetic elite, emerged. They were silent, robed in the Emperor's white, their eyes glowing with a faint purple light. A black guard on a jetpack dove at the dais. Before he could fire, one of the robed telekinetics simply raised his hand. The guard froze in midair, crushed by his own velocity, and then hurled into a crystal column, which shattered. The battle was on. "Threx!" Kalaraya yelled, a command hidden in the chaos. "Now! Burn the house down!" "With pleasure, princess!" the AI's voice screamed in her ear, and suddenly, the hall's own security systems came alive. Dozens of security drones, which had been hidden in the ceiling, dropped down. But they were not firing on Dane. They were Threx's army. They turned, their red optical sensors locking onto Virexel's black guards. The air filled with plasma, with the shriek of jetpacks, and the low, vibrational hum of telekinetic power. It was a beautiful, terrible, swirling chaos of light and death. Dane had grabbed a plasma rifle from a fallen guard. He stood back to back with Kalaraya. It was the ship ambush, all over again. "Your family," he panted, firing at a jetpack trooper. "Throws a hell of a party." "We are not leaving," Kalaraya said, her voice a low, lethal hum. She was watching the ads. Through the smoke, she saw her father, the Emperor Thorian. He was in a bubble. The telekinetic guards had formed a protective shield around him. He was untouched, pale, confused, a relic in the center of the inferno. Virexel saw him too. His plan had failed, but his ambition had not. He was fighting his way toward the dais, his energy spear in hand, intending to finish the coup himself. "Cover me," Kalaraya said. "What? I am covering you," Dane yelled. She ran, not toward the exit. She ran back into the fight, toward the dais. Her silver armor made her the brightest target in the room. "Kalaraya!" Dane roared, laying down a sheet of suppressive fire. She vaulted the burning wreckage, her energy whip now in her hand, and met Virexel at the steps of the throne. "You ruined it!" Virexel snarled, his face contorted. He lunged with the energy spear. She was faster. Her whip, an extension of her own rage, snapped out. It wrapped around the spear, and she pulled. He stumbled, and she met him with an armored boot to the chest, sending him crashing back. She did not kill him. She turned her back to her brother and faced the telekinetic shield. "Let me in," she commanded. The purple shield wavered. The guards recognized the blood. The shield opened. Kalaraya stepped into the eye of the storm. She was alone with her father, Dane, Virexel, the war. It was all outside. "Father," she said, her voice echoing in the sudden pressurized quiet of the shield. Emperor Thorian looked at his daughter, his savior. "Kalaraya, you stopped him. Did I?" Her voice was cold. She raised her gauntlet and pointed not at Virexel, but at him. "You knew. The data, it was all in your console. You knew he was a slaver. You knew he was building an army. You let him. He is my son," Thorian whispered, the confession torn from him. "He was cleaning up the weakness, the alien influences. It was necessary for the Dominion. Weakness, she repeated. The word was acid. You call love weakness? You call mercy weakness? You stood there. You were going to watch him. She gestured to Dane, fighting for his life outside the bubble. Die. You were going to let my brother crown himself in your name. It was politics, the Emperor stammered. For the good of the... There is no good, Calariah said. She turned to the main Diascom, the one used to address the entire spire. Daughter, what are you doing? Her father said, a new panic in his voice. You cannot. That is treason. No. Father, Calariah said, her hand on the activation switch. And this is the truth. She slammed her fist down. Threx, broadcast, everything. The cleansing file, the shadow ledgers, the creche payments, the order to destroy Epsilon 9. Broadcast it all. Calariah, no! Her father lunged for her. She simply held him back with one armored hand. Broadcast it, she repeated. To every console, in every ship, on every world in this dominion. Across the hall, the fighting sputtered. The data was everywhere. On the holographic banners, on the nobles' personal data pads. The truth, in a cold, hard, Zell script. The rot, the slavery, the coup, the Emperor's signature, authorizing the funds. Virexel stopped. He looked at the data. He looked at his father. He looked at Calariah. He had lost. This dominion, Calariah's voice boomed, now broadcast to 1 billion souls, is a lie. It is built on blood, and it is run by monsters. And I am my father's daughter. She reached up and unfastened the clasps of her ceremonial armor. She let the heavy silver and violet chest plate fall to the floor with a crash. Beneath, she wore only a simple black tunic. I am Calariah Zelvor, heir to the spire, and I do hereby, in the name of truth, abdicate this poisoned throne. She turned her back on her father, on the crown, on the whole, burning, corrupt system. She looked out at the chaos, at Dane, who was staring at her, his rifle lowered. I renounce my name, I renounce my blood, and I renounce this failure of an empire. The hall, the spire, the dominion fell into chaos. The nobles were screaming. The guards were lowering their weapons, unsure who to trust. The diplomats were running for their ships. Calariah walked out of the telekinetic shield. She walked past her brother, who was on his knees, stunned. She walked past her father, who had collapsed onto his own throne, a broken old man. She walked to Dane. She took the plasma rifle from his hand. A Bay 94, she said, her voice no longer a princess's but a woman's. Threx has a ship. I was beginning to like your armor, Dane said, his voice raw. It was too heavy, she replied. They ran. They fought their way out. 2 soldiers, side by side. They ran through the spire, which was now tearing itself apart. Loyalists fought cleansers. Families turned on families, and the Crystal Tower, once a symbol of perfection, was burning. They made it to Bay 94. The small, black smuggling ship was waiting, its ramp down. They blasted off, leaving the screaming, dying, beautiful spire behind. They jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Velthalra system to its own self-destruction. They drifted for weeks, hiding in unregistered nebulae, letting the galaxy forget them. They were ghosts. They found it at the edge of the galaxy, in an Earth sector the creche had long forgotten. A hidden colony, a planet with a single yellow sun, a world not of crystal but of green and blue. The ship landed on a stretch of wet, yellow sand. Calariah stepped out. The air hit her first. It was not sterile. It was thick. It was heavy with moisture and salt, and the smell of decaying living things. It was loud. The ocean. It was not a placid, decorative Zell sea. It was a chaotic, churning, roaring mass of blue-gray water. She had read about Earth's simplicity. She had been wrong. It was not simple. It was complex. It was a billion chaotic, uncontrolled systems all living and dying at once. Dane stood beside her. He took a deep breath, the first real breath he had taken in 6 years. "It smells like home," he said. Kalaraya looked at the single sun, a perfect, warm, golden circle. She looked at the water crashing on the shore, and she, who had not cried for her family, or her throne, or her burning world, began to weep, tears of release. They lived quietly. They found a small town, nestled in blue-green mountains that were ancient and worn. They were just people. He worked as a mechanic. His hands, which had only ever killed or fought, now learned to build. She learned to be still. She learned to garden, to feel the dirt under her nails, to watch the messy, chaotic, beautiful cycle of life. They were at peace, hiding. One evening, years later, they were sitting on their porch, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. There was a knock. Not a knock. A timid tapping. Dane was on his feet in an instant, the instinct still there. Kalaraya put a hand on his arm. They opened the door. There were children, 3 of them. They were thin and scared, and they were not human. They were Zell, refugees, who had spent years in a cold sleep transport, following the last known jump coordinates of a rebel princess. They were children of the fallen Dominion. One of them, a small girl with wide, frightened, violet eyes, stepped forward. She had her mother's. She had Kalaraya's eyes. Kalaraya knelt, her hands, for the first time, not trembling. She held her hand out to the child. She was once royalty. But Earth was where she learned how to love.